White snow blanketed O'Hare Airport like a silver sheet veiling the horizon. The loudspeaker echoed with flight delay announcements, accompanied by sighs and murmured complaints. Amid the sea of people and scattered luggage, Daniel Whitaker, entrepreneur, Harvard alumnus, and heir to a well-known name in the fintech world, was struggling with a suitcase stuck on a broken wheel. "Let me help." The voice was calm, firm. Daniel looked up to see a woman in a gray knit hat with round, dark eyes and a strangely serene expression. She nudged the suitcase loose with such ease that it surprised him. Thank you. You're on flight 8120 to San Francisco, right?" She held up her phone, showing the screen with the delayed flight info. "That's right. I'm Daniel. Maya Lin." She extended her hand. "Do you have a connecting flight?" Daniel shook his head. Maya gave a small nod, then motioned for him to follow. She led him to an empty counter and pulled out a platinum card to rebook the flight. "There's one seat left on the 500 a.m. flight tomorrow. I booked it." He opened his mouth to speak, but Maya just smiled. "I'm on that flight too. Customs says we're temporary travel companions." They sat down for coffee. Maya took the seat across from him. Between them flowed a quiet stream of conversation, cityscapes and architecture, Maya startups and shareholders. Daniel, the sudden death of a loved one. Daniel mentioned his younger brother who had passed away. Maya only nodded gently. "I once loved someone like that," she said. Before they parted, Maya handed Daniel a small book, The Architecture of Memory, a volume she carried on every trip. "You should read page 47, she whispered softly, meeting his eyes. "It talks about spaces that can be reconstructed through memory." A while after Maya disappeared into the crowd, Daniel opened the book to the page she mentioned. Scrawled across it in handwriting was this note: "Form is not the destination, but memory. Everyone we meet becomes an outline in the space we carry." Daniel looked out the window. The snow was still falling, but in his heart, something called promise had just spoken. Elan, a quiet, elegant restaurant near the San Francisco Bay, was lit with warm lights and carried a distinct earthy scent of aged wood, low-hanging lamps, and soft jazz music echoing in the air. Maya arrived first, dressed in a charcoal gray dress with a worn coat and leather shoes that had clearly traveled many years. Daniel was already seated at their reserved table, his face brighter than usual, as though he had poured all his focus into this evening. "You picked this place." Maya smiled, sitting down. "Very intentional. I thought we needed somewhere quiet enough to really hear each other." Daniel replied, his gaze often drawn to the curve of her smile. The evening unfolded with layers of emotion, laughter, interspersed with silences that meant more than words. Maya shared about her years living in San Francisco, how she arrived filled with hope and ambition, and how she later returned to Chicago quietly, after a love that unraveled. "Marcus," she said, her fingers absently tracing the stem of her wine glass. "He was the first person who made me feel truly heard." Daniel was silent for a moment. He masked it well and gently shifted the subject when Maya asked about his family. Daniel spoke of the brother he had lost, Marcus. "I never really knew much about Marcus's personal life. The way he kept things quiet, closed off." The wine glass in Maya's hand froze. She looked up at him. "Marcus Delgado." Daniel nodded. "Yes, you knew him." Silence answered first, a heavy silence. Maya felt herself remembering the man she had loved, the man who had vanished, claiming a heart condition. Now it turned out, he was the younger brother of the man sitting across from her. Daniel noticed the shift in Maya's eyes, as if something inside her had cracked. He leaned forward, concerned. "Are you okay?" Maya simply nodded. "Would you show me a photo of Marcus?" Daniel pulled out his phone and swiped through a few pictures, until one appeared, the two brothers at a rare family picnic. Marcus beamed in the shot, and Daniel looked at him with deep affection. "That's him," Maya whispered, clutching her wine glass, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. "He's the man I loved for 3 years." Daniel froze. A reflexive disbelief surfaced that his brother had lived a second life, filled with emotion, love, and intensity, and had never once mentioned it to his family. They both sat in silence for a long while, steadying the emotional tide that had suddenly risen. At last, Daniel spoke, his voice barely audible. "I wish we hadn't met at that airport." But then he shook his head. "But you know something. You're the first person in 10 years who made me want to remember a face. And you're the first person who's made me want to believe in a new beginning," Maya replied quietly, her eyes holding something she hadn't yet dared to say. At the end of the evening, Daniel made a suggestion. "Let's find out more about Marcus. Why he lived like that. Why he chose silence. Why he died." And Maya nodded. Beneath the shimmering lights of the San Francisco night, this was no longer just a fated reunion. It had become a turning point, a threshold into the past, an unraveling of a secret buried far too long. Maya and Daniel remained silent for the entire drive back from the restaurant to the hotel. Inside the quiet car, only the sound of rain brushing against the windshield could be heard, along with the flickering amber of streetlights, casting a shifting glow across two faces, still reeling from a truth neither of them had been prepared to uncover. Daniel was the one to break the silence. Marcus lived 2 lives. "I didn't know. I didn't know anything about my own brother." Maya leaned slightly toward the window, clutching the book Marcus had once given her, her cheekbones sharper under the dim yellow light. "Have you ever been inside Marcus's apartment?" "No," Daniel replied. "After I moved to New York, his place here stayed untouched. I didn't have the heart to step in. Until now. I want to go," Maya said firmly. "We need to know the truth." At the apartment secured with a double-layered digital lock, Daniel pulled out the backup key. This was Marcus's so-called sanctuary, a place where he had distanced himself from family, from relationships, and perhaps even from himself. Inside the space was immaculate. Books stacked to the ceiling, papers and pencils carefully arranged beside notebooks. Maya moved slowly through the room, pausing at a photo of Marcus holding hands with a group of black children in what looked like a poor neighborhood school. Daniel pointed to a built-in cabinet against the wall. Marcus never kept anything in the safe, unless it was important. After entering the code, the date of Daniel's car accident years ago, the safe clicked open. Inside were a USB drive, an old leather journal, and a sealed envelope. Daniel opened the journal as Maya inserted the USB into the laptop. The screen filled with compiled reports, scans of documents linked to Corvus, a joint defense venture between the government and a financial conglomerate. He discovered a $2 billion embezzlement, Maya read aloud. He knew it was Richard Porter, the Secretary of Defense, behind it. Daniel scanned Marcus's journal pages, filled with anguished handwriting. "If you ever find this, forgive me for not having the courage to live honestly." The envelope contained a final letter from Marcus to Maya. "I didn't love you because you were perfect." Maya whispered, her voice, quivering eyes shining with tears. "I loved you because I believed you were trying to be real." Daniel closed the journal, his voice calm but steady. "We have evidence. The USB, the journal, and danger." Outside the window, a dark figure darted past. A soft clicking sound echoed near the door. Daniel's voice sharpened. "Someone knows we're here. We don't have much time." Maya shut the laptop, pocketed the USB, and looked straight at him. "Are you ready?" "No," Daniel admitted, "but I'm going anyway." And so they began a journey, not only to uncover the truth about Marcus, but to discover who they really were themselves. Marcus's apartment in San Francisco's Mission District did not look like the space of a man who had given up on the world. On the contrary, it was meticulously organized, as if his mind had never allowed itself to rest. Every drawer was labeled, each photo on the wall carefully chosen, but none of them included Maya. Daniel entered with a heavy heart. His eyes scanned the room as though searching for something or someone left behind. Maya said nothing. She didn't need to search. She could feel Marcus everywhere, in the scent of stale Ethiopian coffee sealed in a tin, in the old leather jacket draped over the chair. And just like the last time she had seen Marcus, the space held far too many things that had never been spoken. After a moment of rifling through the apartment, Daniel stopped in front of a small wall safe. A handwritten note was taped across the edge. "Everything important is only valuable at the right time." He glanced at Maya, then tried entering Marcus's birthday. No luck. Maya stepped forward and silently keyed in a different sequence, the date Marcus had nearly died in a car accident, a date only she would remember. Click. Inside the safe was a silver USB drive, a thick file folder, a leather-bound journal, and a red wax-sealed envelope labeled, "To the last person who still believes in me." Daniel reached for the envelope, but Maya stopped him. "Not yet," she said. "We start with the truth." They plugged the USB into the laptop. The screen lit up with encrypted folders: Core VES, Blackstream, DoD agreements. There were hidden camera videos from closed-door meetings, email exchanges between Marcus and powerful figures in government and defense. Among them was someone they had both seen on TV, Secretary of Defense Richard Porter. "Corvus isn't just a defense contractor," Daniel murmured. "They're the core of a multi-billion-dollar embezzlement network." Maya flipped through the folder full of financial statements, wire transfers, fake contracts. But what froze her was not the money. It was the final photo in the stack: Marcus, in a meeting with Richard Porter, and a bespectacled middle-aged man, James Harrington, someone Marcus had once trusted completely. He knew, Maya whispered. Marcus knew they were going to kill him. Just then, Daniel's phone vibrated. An anonymous message, just 3 words. "Stop. Now." The laptop screen went black. Data was deleted in an instant, as if someone had been watching them from the other side. The room thickened with tension. Daniel lunged for the hard drive, pulling the USB, but it had already fried burnt and useless. "We still have the journal," he said, but Maya had already reached for the wax-sealed envelope. She opened it with trembling hands. "If you're reading this, I may no longer have the chance to explain, but please believe me. Everything I did, including walking away from you, was to keep you safe." Maya collapsed into the nearest chair. Daniel grabbed the journal and flipped through pages full of Marcus's handwriting. Some entries detailed secret meetings, fraudulent defense budgets, and insider conversations from Corvus with government officials adjusting military equipment prices. And then scrawled in red ink near the end, "If anything happens, go to Presidio. James knows everything." Sirens wailed from the street below. Not the usual kind. It was an alert. Maya stood. "We're being watched." Daniel stuffed the documents into his backpack. Just as they slipped out the back door, the front was kicked in. 3 men in black, unmarked professional, stormed the apartment. Maya and Daniel raced through the narrow alley, their hands clasped, not just out of fear, but because from that moment on, there would be no turning back. The USB was burnt, the laptop wiped, but Daniel's backpack still held the journal, and in Maya's memory remained one name: James Harrington. Following Marcus's final legacy, they were forced to confront what neither had imagined, not just a past full of buried truths, but a power network willing to kill to protect its secrets. And in that brief moment, as their footsteps echoed through San Francisco's shadowy corners, their new fragile love was forced to grow up. It was no longer a romantic story. between two lonely hearts. It had become a battle for survival, a pursuit of justice, and above all, a journey of forgiveness. A light rain drizzled over Presidio, the old military cemetery tucked along the San Francisco coastline. Rows of white gravestones stretched neatly beneath the silver pines, the final resting place of those who once bore arms for the nation, and now the setting for a meeting marked by fate. Maya clutched her coat tighter as she and Daniel made their way toward the low hill, the only spot not obscured by trees. He was already there. James Harrington, tall and lean, salt and pepper hair, wrapped in a worn wool coat. He didn't look like a former high-ranking military advisor, let alone someone carrying the nation's deepest secrets. James Harrington. Daniel spoke first. He nodded slightly. I assume you found what Marcus left behind. Not enough, Maya said flatly. The USB was destroyed. They know we're digging, and they won't stop. Harrington bowed his head, as if he had anticipated this. Marcus knew this day would come. He didn't just uncover the truth, he tried to keep it alive. Before he died, he backed up everything to a hard drive. Hidden somewhere, no one would think to look, a remote cabin in the Mendocino forest. The catch is, I'm the only one who knows how to get there. Daniel looked at Maya. Then let's go. Harrington shook his head, his expression stern. If you leave now, there's a good chance you'll be followed. There's no phone signal on the way there. Once you're in, if anything happens, no one can help you. We're not here to be saved, Maya replied, her eyes burning. We're here for justice. James nodded slowly. Then follow me. On the road to the cabin, James's old pickup truck wound through the snaking mountain roads, where the glow of city lights was swallowed by the darkness of the dense forest. Maya sat in the back seat, clutching the backpack that held the journal. Daniel sat up front beside Harrington, eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Everyone in the military knew Marcus was a genius. James said, eyes fixed on the slippery road. What they didn't know was that he didn't just analyze data, he questioned ethics. He doubted the very things he was paid to protect. And when he started looking into corvies, I told him to stop. Because you were afraid, Maya asked. Because I knew exactly what they were capable of, he replied. Corvus isn't just a company. It's a structure, a network binding corporations, politics, and warfare. And Porter, the one at the top, doesn't hesitate to kill. Daniel gripped the dashboard. Then why help us? James inhaled deeply. Because I stayed silent when Marcus cried for help. I owe him. The cabin emerged like a ghost through the mist. A small wooden house with a tin roof nestled deep in the redwood forest. The scent of damp earth and rotting wood hung thick in the air. James entered first, checking every window, every lock. No signs of entry, he said. We're safe for now. Inside the cabin was a miniature archive. Hundreds of military documents, maps, notebooks, and a rusted steel cabinet secured with a coded lock. He used a password only someone who truly understood Marcus could guess. James said, fingers hovering over the keypad. My guess is the date your brother had that accident. Daniel stayed silent. He entered the date he nearly died in a car crash, when Marcus was the first to visit him in the hospital. Click. The cabinet opened. Inside was a sleek black hard drive still sealed, and a letter with Marcus's scribbled handwriting. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back, but at least now you can finish what I couldn't. Maya took the hard drive. Daniel held the letter. They hadn't even opened it when the sound of shattering glass pierced the silence. Footsteps. A flash of flashlights beaming into the cabin. They've found us, James whispered. Get ready to move. The three of them retreated toward the back trap door, an escape tunnel built beneath the floorboards. As they prepared to descend, James stopped. I'll stay. No, Maya protested. They need to be stalled. I'm the only one who ever belonged in their world. I'll draw them in long enough for you two to disappear." Before Maya could respond, James pushed them into the tunnel and sealed the hatch. Above them, gunfire erupted loud and chaotic. The tunnel led to the forest's edge where James had stashed another vehicle. They barely cleared the cabin's perimeter when Daniel's phone lit up a message from Catherine West, a federal prosecutor who once worked with Marcus on an internal investigation. "Don't leave the forest. We've tracked Porter. Forces en route. Send coordinates." Daniel looked at Maya. She nodded. "Send it." Hours later, as dawn broke through the trees, an FBI team led by Catherine West raided the cabin. 2 of Porter's operatives were captured. James was found wounded, but alive. And from the hard drive, Maya carried over 12 gigabytes of data, emerged the full extent of the conspiracy money laundering fraudulent contracts, and proof that Porter had signed the order to eliminate Marcus. At a major press conference, Catherine West declared, "We have everything. And no one, not even the Secretary of Defense, is above the law." But after victory came another war. Maya and Daniel, 2 people who had met on a snowy afternoon at the airport, now stood at a crossroads. Doubt no longer lingered. Only the heavy weight of Marcus's legacy. A looming question: could a love born from betrayal truly endure? Daniel looked at Maya. "We've made it through fire. But are you sure you want to keep walking this path?" Maya stared into the forest. Wind howled through the trees. Marcus's letter was still in her hand, still unopened. She nodded gently. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this is where truth begins, and I don't want to walk it alone." Daniel extended his hand. Maya took it. In the damp woods with sunlight filtering through fractured leaves, they said nothing. But that one gesture was a new beginning. No longer 2 people caught in the secrets of the dead, but 2 souls learning how to live honestly among the ashes of the past. The hidden cabin in the old pine forest where Marcus had lived in hiding during the final weeks of his life emerged through the thick fog like a blurred memory come to life. Maya and Daniel arrived in silence, both exhausted, yet their eyes still burned with determination. Each step through the damp woods brought them closer to the truth, and perhaps to imminent danger. The cabin was small, the tin-roofed wooden structure aged, yet everything inside was kept orderly. On the wooden walls hung photos of slums, technical schematics, and diagrams of military infrastructure. Marcus hadn't just investigated, he had prepared. In one corner, an old safe was hidden behind a bookshelf. Daniel recognized the combination lock symbol. It was the day he and Marcus had last visited their mother together, the only day they didn't argue. He entered the numbers. A soft click, a file. Inside was a file stamped Corvus Confidential, a red USB drive with handwritten codes and a sealed envelope labeled Maya. Daniel quietly handed her the letter. Maya took it, her hands trembling. She opened it, eyes locked on each handwritten line from Marcus. "Maya, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, for living 2 lives, for letting you love a part of me without knowing the rest. I know Daniel will find everything. Please believe me. He was the last person I ever wanted to hurt. I didn't just love you. I trusted you. I believe you'll finish the road I couldn't walk to the end. This USB contains all the evidence about Corvus manipulating defense contracts. I was going to go public, but I was being watched. You and Daniel, you're my last hope. Don't let my death be meaningless." Maya folded the letter, holding it to her chest. Daniel looked at her eyes, stinging. "We have to release it." But just then, a window shattered. Maya screamed as a bullet struck the cabin wall near her head. Daniel pulled her down. From the forest, flashlights flickered and footsteps charged forward. "They're here!" Daniel hissed. A team of black-clad, fully armed men, led by none other than Secretary of Defense Richard Porter. The man behind Corvus burst in. Porter entered the cabin, gun in hand, eyes cold. "Well, this is touching." A city engineer and a betrayed investor playing detective. Daniel stood in front of Maya. "Marcus had everything, and now it belongs to us." Porter sneered. "No one believes the dead, and certainly not a couple who accidentally stumbled into the biggest secret in defense history." Just then, a small explosion outside. The lights went out. Footsteps rushed in. James Harrington appeared holding a shotgun, firing a warning shot into the ceiling. "Catherine West is coming," I called her via satellite. Porter shouted, "Kill them all!" Gunfire erupted. Maya and Daniel followed James's orders, diving into the emergency tunnel beneath the cabin, a route Marcus had dug in case of emergency. James stayed behind, returning fire to cover them. As Daniel and Maya emerged from the tunnel, at the edge of the woods, an FBI helicopter landed. Federal prosecutor Catherine West stepped out with a SWAT team. Searchlights swept across the forest. Porter and his men were arrested on the spot. James, wounded in the shoulder, smiled as Catherine read the official arrest warrant. "Richard Porter, you are under arrest for conspiracy to embezzle defense funds, evidence tampering, and involvement in the death of Marcus Whitaker." Maya and Daniel stood in the chaos. She squeezed his hand. Daniel turned to her, eyes full of tears. "We did it. Marcus, he didn't die in vain." Maya nodded, but in her heart she knew this victory was only the beginning. They had unmasked a web of deceit, but ahead lay the long path of rebuilding from the ruins. In her hand, the USB, still burning like a small flame, was lighting the rest of the truth. The forest slowly quieted again, but the echoes of the deadly night at the cabin still lingered in every step Maya and Daniel took. The next morning, they sat with Catherine West before a temporary investigative panel at a federal security center in Sacramento. Catherine placed the USB drive on the mahogany conference table. "The data here has been verified and authenticated. This is the biggest blow to the defense sector since the Blackwell scandal." The long-buried reports from Corvus came to light, documents on fraudulent bidding, covert overseas wire transfers, and evidence of the unexplained deaths of 3 internal whistleblowers. Marcus had quietly compiled them, placing them in the hands of the only person he trusted, Maya. A week later, the news dominated every screen. Defense Secretary resigns amid decades' biggest corruption scandal. Corvus freezes all operations. Federal investigation expands. The woman behind the exposure, Maya Serrano, urban planning engineer. Daniel appeared beside her in nearly every frame, no longer as a financial advisor, but as a survivor emerging from the wreckage. Yet the media couldn't grasp the whole truth. Behind those photos lay a soul-wrenching journey of love, loss, and redemption. One afternoon in Golden Gate Park, beneath a maple tree ablaze in autumn red, Maya stood quietly before Marcus Whitaker's memorial plaque. It had been erected after the truth was made public. Etched into the stone, he did not die in silence. He was the first to speak. Daniel approached, holding something small. It was the ring Maya had once returned to Marcus, but now it was no longer a symbol of betrayal. He opened his palm and offered it to Maya. "You may not need it, but I want you to keep it, as a reminder that true love doesn't have to be perfect, only brave." Maya smiled. "And are you brave, Daniel?" He met her gaze. "I used to run. Not anymore." They didn't kiss. No tears were shed. They simply held hands, a firm, real grip that didn't let go. Within them, Marcus still lived. But now, they were finally living for themselves. A month later, Maya accepted an invitation to a special interview on national television. When the host asked, "If you could go back to that snowy night at Chicago O'Hare, would you still help a stranger struggling with a stuck suitcase?" Maya smiled. "If I hadn't helped him, a lot of terrible things might still have happened. But one thing is certain. I would have had no one to face them with. Final scene. Maya and Daniel walked out of the federal building, where Corvus had been officially dissolved and its assets reclaimed by the government. A light breeze stirred, carrying maple leaves across the San Francisco sky. Daniel said, "Do you think it's really over?" Maya replied, "No. But at last, we started right." They walked away hand in hand with no need for spotlights or applause. Their love wasn't a miracle. It was a choice. It was courage. And it was the first chapter of something imperfect but real.